Welcome to Pre-algebra, and so we're on lesson 65. We do not have any supplement today, so we'll just start with lesson 65 here. So lesson 65, and this is just proportions with mixed fractions. So we'll just write it like that. So proportions. I have mixed fractions, so with mixed fractions. Okay, so mixed fraction, right, different than an improper fraction, right, because we have a whole number and then a fraction with it, right? So there's two steps really. So the first step here is pretty straightforward. We just rewrite as improper. So we're just going to rewrite whatever we're given as improper. So rewrite as improper, okay? That's our first step. And then our second step is to go ahead and cross multiply, okay, to solve. And we could write some other steps here, but I think we're going to keep it pretty simple here because we've done things like this before. We'll say cross multiply and isolate our variable, okay? Isolate to solve, okay? So pretty straightforward here, right? So if I went to example 1, the only thing is that the fractions look a little different, right? Because here I have example 1, there, let's keep our steps there. But I have 4/9 on the top of this fraction, and then I have another fraction bar, and then there's x on the bottom, right? And then I have equals, and then on this side I have 2 1/5, right? So I have 2 1/5. So you say, okay, well if I have 2 1/5, I can just write that as 10 plus 1, so I can write it as 11 over 5, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So 11 over 5, right? You can write it off to the side, right, and say, okay, this was 2 1/5, right? That was the same thing, and then over here, I had 1 3/4. So I'm going to write that over here, 1 3/4, 3/4. And that one would be right at a 4 for that number, and then add to 3, so I have 7 over 4. And everyone write your 7. I like to cross it like that. Okay. And then if I'm going to cross multiply and say, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that, and before I finish doing that, x is over 1. So you can see that they're all fractions, right? Anything can be made a fraction if you just divide it by 1, right? It doesn't change the value. So if I'm going to cross multiply, that means I multiply my cross fractions here like that, and then they're equal to the other ones that are crossed and multiplied, right? So that means I can multiply this first one here, right? So I'll do this one first. And so I have 4/9 times 7/4, so 4/9, 7/4, and then I have equal to x over 1 times 11/5. And then we'll go quickly do this, right? So then I have these 4's cancel out and they become 1's. And then that's it pretty much, right? And then I have 7 over 9, right? And then it's equal to 11 times x over 5. And at this point, you could think about cross multiplying again, or we could do something different, right? And say, well, I see that the reciprocal of 11/5 here, right? Because this is 11 times x divided by 5, right? I could use my reciprocal thing, or I could cross multiply again, which just would be doing this, right? I could do this again, right? The cross products are always equal to each other. So if I did that, then I have 7 times 5, which is 35. And then I have 99 times x, right? And then 99x is equal to 35. And then if I were to simplify that, right, say, well, what does that mean? It means I'm doing 99 times x, right? And then, right, when I'm talking about math, I want to talk about inverse operations. So the opposite of multiplying x by 99 is dividing by 99. So dividing by 99, and then I have to do it on the other side to make it the same, right? Right, to be fair to my equation. And so then I have x is 35 over 99. That's it. Okay. All right. And that pretty much completes our course of mixed numbers, right? You're going to follow the same sort of step here, no matter what your problem is, right? Just make sure you recognize where your fraction bar is, right? And give something a denominator of 1 if it doesn't already have a denominator assigned to it. All right, now we're going to talk about similar triangles. So we didn't put that actually as the title there, but now we have similar triangles as well. Okay, and these are proportions, so it's in the same sort of thinking of proportions. Okay, so you have similar triangles. You want to solve these, right? But you want to write the units first, right? So you want to write the units. And then if you have 2, right, you're going to write a proportion. Okay. And you might have questions about this as you go along, so I'll try to answer what questions you might have as you go here, right? But then we're going to solve this one using the same thing, right? We're going to solve with cross multiplication. Okay. I might not finish writing that. Okay, but multiplication. So when I say write units, I basically am talking about writing big triangle over a small triangle. Okay, so that's like pretty straightforward. Then our right proportion, I want to follow the same order. So for example 2, you'll see I have a couple triangles written there. I have this first one here. I'll try to draw it as best I can, but you'll see it in the book as well, right? I have 2, and then I have 4, and then I have 5, and you see here I have these little things written in the corners that have like 2 tick marks or whatever, saying that this angle is equivalent, right? So I have 1 here, and then I have 3 written over here, right? It just means that when I draw the second triangle, right, I have a 3 written for this side over here, and then I have an X over here, and then I have Y. They have the same angles written for me with the same tick marks. It means that they're set up and they're just scaled, right? Okay. So if I want to do big to small triangle, right? So that's the first step. I could do it that way, right? So then say, okay, write the units. So then I can say, okay, I'm going to do big to small, right? So I'm going to do that. Auto minimize here. Okay. Then, right, and you say, okay, well, if it's big to small, then I can write something like this, right? I say, well, 3 is to 2, right? Okay, so 3 is to 2 because that's this one to this one, right? So I can say 3 is to 2. I say as x is to 4, right? And then I can cross multiply. So let me see if I can move this thing somewhere else. Okay. So, right, and I can say, okay, well, I can cross multiply, here we go. All right, and then I can say, okay, that means I have 12, because that's 4 times 3, right? And then it's 2x. And that was 2 times x. So now I know x is equal to 6, right? Okay, so I got x. That was pretty easy. Now let's do the other one, because I need to find y, right? So I can use the same proportions, right? And I say, okay, 3 is to 2, and then I can write, okay, well, if 3 is to 2, then y is related to 5, right? So I say it like that. And then just for a different color, just to um, show the cross multiplication this way, right? Then I say, okay, then I have 15, right? 5 times 3 is equal to 2y. And you say, well, this time, where's my y going to be? Because equal to 15, I don't know how to divide that. Well, you're not really dividing it as much as you are just right, putting the 2 on the bottom, right? Because I can divide that by 2, putting the 2 there, right? You don't even need a calculator for this because all they want is for you to write y is 15 over 2, right? But then if you figure that out, you're like, oh, well, that is just 7, right? It's just 7, and then I have 1 left over, so it's just 7.5. So those would be your two answers there, right? 15 over 2 would work, 7.5 would work, and then x is 6. And that's it. So that pretty much summarizes that. So as you go to practice A, B, and C, just try to follow these same steps there. Okay. All right, and then when you're finished, you can follow here. We're going to go to lesson 66. Okay. And so with lesson 66, we're going to talk about ratio word problems, which is, related. Really, ratios are just fractions. So they have a lot of similarities. So that's a good thing, okay? So ratio word problems, right? And word problems, right, they're not our favorite thing sometimes, but hopefully this will help um, uh, make them a little bit less scary, okay? So I'm going to write down 5 steps, so it seems like a lot of steps, okay? But first, I'm just going to say write the units, okay? So, if I write, ratio of boys to girls, then I'm going to say, okay, well, let's B and G, right? So I'm going to write my units. And then I'm going to write a given ratio, right? So I'm going to write my ratio. So write the ratio. And then I'm going to write, right, could all be combined into one step probably, right? But I'm going to write the given amount, right? So I'm messy here, sorry. Okay, and then I'm going to then find the missing multiplier, right? So I'm going to find the multiplier. And then I'm just going to find the answer, right? And then I'm going to calculate the answer. Calculate the answer. So let's see if we can keep these mostly on the page when I write this one, okay? So if you look at example 1, it talks about parrots and macaws, right? So very similar things, but it says the ratio of the number of parrots to the number of macaws. Okay, so that gets me through my first step, right? Parrots to macaws. So you say, okay, well, how do you represent parrots? Well, why not use a P, right? So let's use a P. And let's change our color real quick. So you say, okay, parrots, and then let's say we have macaws, right? Okay, parrots and macaws. And then it says the ratio is 5 to 7, right? Okay, well, it's written the same order, right? So you say, okay, that's 5 to 7. I'm going to write them a little different than I did our proportions last one, right? But I say 5 to 7, right? So that's parrots, macaws. And then it says, how many macaws were there? okay, when the parrot's numbered 750. Okay, the parrot's numbered 750, so that is related to this top piece, right? All right, let me erase that real quick. Okay, so 750, so that's like this. And I'm just going to give it a little space and you'll see why, right? So I'll say, okay, 750, okay, and then this ratio has to be consistent, right? And you say, okay, well then why is this column here, right? This is my multiplier column, right? So you can say it's my times column or whatever, but I'll say multiplier and I'll put it like that. And then this one right here, this value that's going to be in both of these boxes is going to be exactly the same. Okay, so you say, well, then you can do 750 divided by 5, right? Yeah, you could. And then you'd have to multiply this by 150 in order to get there. Well, it turns out, right, if I want the same ratio, this has to be multiplied by 150 as well, right? And if I multiply that by 150 as well, then I'm doing 7 times 150, right? Then I get 1,050, right? So 1,050. So that would be my answer, okay? Because that's how many macaws I would have if I had 750 parrots, if the ratio is the same. And, the thing that I like to see here, right, is that you could actually add these up and you could actually say, well, if I add parrots and macaws together, I could get a total, right? This is not part of the problem. But I could say I get a total, and then I would have 12 here, right? And then my multiplier is still the same, so I still get 12 times 150, and then I would get an answer here, right? And then I would get, if I added these up, right? Well, if I did 12 times 150, I would get 1800, right? And if I added these up, okay, like this, I would get 1800 as well. So you can see it would work for this column down here. They didn't ask, right, because they actually gave me this 750. But if they gave me a total number, then I should be able to add these up, right, because I can add parrots and macaws and find what we would know as a triple ratio. And we'll learn about those a little bit later as well. And that's pretty much it for this lesson. You can go to the practice there, and then when you finish, then you can go to, we're just going to discuss lesson 67. Okay, so lesson 67 here. So we got lots of ratios here, right? So we have lesson 67. We're going to talk about ratios to compare, right? So ratios for comparison. We're going to follow similar steps here. Okay. Right, we're going to just listen to the example and then sort of write it down as we hear it. Okay, so if we hear something like, what's the best price, right? So someone's looking for the best price. You might have seen this in the store. They have price per ounce or price per pound, right? So what is the best price, right? Right, and then you say, well, it's the lowest price per item, right? So we say lowest price per item, the lowest price per item or something like that, right? Pretty straightforward stuff. Okay, so in example 2, okay, let's start using different color here. Less red is too much, okay? So example 2, it says that I have a big can, right? Okay, a big can of what, right? And say, well, it doesn't really matter. It's just a big can, okay? A big can, it says it held 16 ounces and it cost 80 cents. Okay, so it was 16 ounces, right? So 16 ounces, so we can write that out. 16 ounces. And then they trick to these, right? They just say, okay, and then we'll just put it as a ratio, okay? Because it's comparing. So ratio simply means a fraction. So 16 ounces, and it says cost 80 cents, right? So it's say 80 cents, right? So we'll just write it like that. Say, well, I could reduce that, right? And say, well, yeah, you could. How would I do that? Well, I'd figure out what can go into both of those, right? So let's just go ahead and say this is the big can, though, because they still mention more stuff. So this is the big can, and then they said the small can, okay, small. It said it held 12 ounces and cost 72 cents. So 12 ounces, you might have an idea of which one's cheaper already, okay? But 72 cents for those two. It says which one was a better buy, right? Because usually you just expect me like, oh, I just buy the big one because that's going to be the cheaper one, okay? It's not always the case, okay? And then you say, okay, well then I can go ahead and see if this will work out right and say, okay, well, I can write them like this. I could have actually written them like this, right? I could have written, here, let me use a different color. I could have written, and the book did it this way. They wrote 80 cents, and they wrote 16 ounces. I want to show you guys that, right? I can write this any way I want, right? 72, I just have to be consistent, right? 72 cents and 12 ounces. And then, right, this right here, don't forget, right, this fraction part, whether it's that one or this one, this is like a division sign, okay? This is like divided, okay? So if I want to summarize my big hand, right, let's see, right, let's do it in the green here. So if I did 80 cents for 16 ounces, then that means that I have 5 on the top, right, because 16 will go into 80 5 times. So that means I have 5 cents, and that's 1 ounce, okay? And my small can, I'm getting messy, sorry, I squished it. The 72 divided by 12, 12 will go into 72 6 times. Then I have 6 cents, and then I have 1 ounce. Okay, now, right, just show this real quick. I could have written it the other way, right, and I could have said 1 ounce. Could have figured it out either way, right? I said 1 ounce. I'm going to make this one a little more obvious here. 1 ounce, instead of looking like a letter, right? 1 ounce is 5 cents. And then I could have gone here and I said 1 ounce here, right? Is 6 cents. And I can obviously tell, right? This don't answer the question, right? And say the big is better, right? So better buy. The big is better, right? And then you can box in or something like that. Okay, big is better. All right. And then if you want to go to example 2 real quick, or example 1 rather, right? That one just says 20 beans sold for $1.20. Okay, so 20 pounds of beans sold for $1.20. Okay, so if I write 120 out, right, I can say 120. Well, that's the same thing as 120 cents, right? And sometimes you abbreviate it like that, right? Okay. So 120 cents, and they said 20 pounds of beans, right? Okay, 20 pounds, right? So okay, 20 pounds. That's pretty good price there, right? Then we could say something like this. We could say either one of these, right? We could say 120 cents, 20 pounds. right? And then all they asked was, what is the price per pound of beans, right? And say, okay, well then, right here, I can just go ahead and see how many times it divides in, and then I have 6, right? And so it's 6 cents per 1 pound, and that's it, okay? So I could say that, or I could say the reverse, right? I could say we could say it like that, or if I wanted to reverse it, right? So this is a little different, but I could say I could just say 1 pound 6 cents, or the other way to say it is I could say 1/6. Okay, if I said 1/6, I could say 1/6 a pound, like that, right? And then I could say per 1 cent. Usually I wouldn't write this part on the bottom here. I would write it more like this and say 1/6 pound instead of writing down the bottom. And I would write per cent. Right? Because if I multiply 1/6 times 6, then I will get 1 pound, and then I'll have 6 cents as well. Okay. All right. Now let's, if you go to your example there, you'll get to compare there, and then you can go to lesson 68 when you're ready. Okay, so lesson 68, our last one here, right? We have percent word problems. So I think this actually might be the I don't know. I don't know if it's the trickiest one, but it might be the one that you might have the most questions about, just because that's a lot of reading and just deciphering. Okay, so lesson 68, we have percent word problems. So one thing we've said before is that if you have a partial amount, right, it's a percentage of a total amount, right? Or we say a partial is a fraction of a total, right? And we could represent this with an equation, right? And we can just say a partial, like this, right, is equal to a percent times a total, okay? And then I might abbreviate this, right, and say, hey, it's really like a partial amount. So I might say PA for partial amount. And then I can still write percent like this, and then I can say multiplied, and then it's multiplied by a total. Instead of a T, right, I might do total amount for total amount. Something like that, okay? So very simple, but very important to make sure that it's clear, okay? So this first example here, right? And it actually, I'll mention this, right? But if I'm changing percentage, right? And I want to multiply, right? And I have 100%, then, right? Remember, I'm just going and I'm just changing this to a 1, right? Just like if I had 50%, right? But I'm just changing this to 0.5 because I'm just moving the decimal place over by 2 places, right? I'm just going, just moving over like that. Okay? Okay. So, example 1, they say sales tax is 5% in Maryland, right? Okay, so we have sales tax. So we'll just write tax, right? So you say tax equals 5%. Okay, so that means that 5% is 0.05, right? Okay. It says Joey bought a pair of basketball shoes advertised for $62. Okay, so the shoes were advertised for $62. We say shoes equal 62. Okay, and it says 0.00, so there we go. Okay, and then how much sales tax do you pay? So we're assuming that Joey bought them. It didn't say that, but how much sales tax do you pay? Right, and then you say, okay, well, if the tax is that, right, then we can just write tax, right? Pretty much just the same way we would write our PA, right? So you say, okay, that's PA, and then it's percent times our total amount, okay, right? Or we can write T for tax, and then we can write percent times my shoes, right? Or my S for my shoes. And then we just say, okay, then that means my T is 0.05 times my 62, right? And then if I multiply that out, then I just have tax is $3.10. So he spent, right, $65.10 on his shoes, right? But they didn't ask that. They just said how much sales tax to pay. All right, now let's go to example 3. Right, and you can see these written in your book as well, so you can follow along. But they said, for example 3, right? Complete the percent diagram by finding A and B. Okay, so I have this total here that says I have 600 inside here. And it says this is 100%, right? So it has some little thing like this, and this is before, and then it says after, right? Which is not really representative after. It's just saying I split it up. And I have 180 here, and then I have a 70% marker here. Okay, and then I have A here. Okay, saying, okay, I have this whole thing by breaking it up, right? Well, then obviously I should be able to see that I could say that A is 30%, right? Okay, can I break that part? Oh, I forgot to write B. And then I have B. So I'm supposed to find A and B, okay? So I found A, so I can check that one off, okay? Because if I had 2%, right, that should add up to 100%. And B is 70%, right? So back to my equation, right? BA is percent times my total, right? This is easy because now I say, okay, well, I don't know my partial, but I know my partial is at B, right? And then my percent is 70%, which is 0.7, right? And I can multiply it by my 600. I can either multiply it or I could see, hey, you know what? Since this whole thing added up to 600, I can see my total. I can see if this thing was already what this is going to multiply to, right? So I multiply this, it's going to be 420. I could have already added these numbers, all right? I could have taken 180 away from that, and then I could see, okay, yeah, obviously my B is 420. So there's two ways of looking at a problem. Okay, now our last one says, hopefully that makes sense. Now, if I go to example 4, example 4 simply says, Ewan was a smart shopper. He got a great kilt, okay, for only $433.65. Okay, that doesn't sound like a great deal to me, but you know, you can make what you want of this, right? But it was 30% off the original price. So what was the original price, right? Okay, so he bought it for, right, so it says kilt is 433.65, right? So 433. And then if I want to sketch this out, right? Okay, so this is dollars. So this whole thing, this original price, could be sketched as 100%. And then I could write the discount as a section here, right? And I could say this is 30%, this is 70%. That's very similar to our last problem. And right, and then this is, if I want to put any numbers here, right, then I say this is 433, oops, 33.65. Okay. Okay, my discount was 30%. Oh, I'm noticing this thing looks like a 3. This is not 3. This is just going to be, it's just marking it out as part of that. Okay. And say, well, I can use this percent, right? And say, okay, well, let's write PA again, right? So that's a good first step. Just go and write this thing out. So percent, and then multiply it by my total amount. Say, okay, well, what's my percent? Well, my percent, at least of the amount that I know there, right, is 70%, which is 0.7, right? And then my total amount, well, I actually don't know my total amount, right? So that's going to be my unknown. So my times my total amount would have been 433.65. I don't actually know that, right? But the good thing, okay, is that this is just multiplied by my total amount, right? And just like I've done this before, right? If I go back up here, right, let's see, where did I solve this one before? It was way up here. In our first equation, our first one, right? You say, what's the opposite of multiplying by 2 times y? No, it's dividing by 2, right? And so I did it on both sides, right? You see how I did it on both sides there? So let's go back down here. I multiplied by 0.7. So I can divide by 0.7. It's not exactly, my favorite, okay, but I can do it. I can divide by 0.7, right? And on this side, it just goes away, which means I'm left with total amount, right? And over here, I still got to figure it out. So now I can set it up, all right? And I can say, okay, I have 433.65, and yay for calculators in a couple weeks, right? Because we'll be able to use our calculator to do this, and we won't do this. But this should be a very routine exercise, right? Should be pretty easy. It's tedious, but it's easy, right? Okay, so over here, and then I move it over here, right? Because I have to divide by whole numbers. So now I'm dividing by 7, and my decimal place is right there. So 7 goes into 43, right? How many times? Not 7, but 6 times, right? So 6 times, and that means I have 42, which means I have a remainder of 1. I can bring my 3 down. That is 1 time 7, subtract, I have 6, and I have another 6 to bring down. And then that means I have 9, right? So I have 9, and 9 times 7 is 63. Subtract again, I get a 3, and then I bring down my 5, and then 7 goes into 35 5 times. So I have a nice number here. So my total, or my original price for that kilt was $619.50. Pretty pricey. Wouldn't do that, okay? So anyway, as you finish the practice up for this one, just let me know if you have any questions. I have more tutoring hours on. You see the link that I sent by email, and yeah, let me know if you need anything else as you look towards the midterm. Okay. All right. Talk to you later, guys. Bye.